Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 31 of Xiaolin Showdown, The Last Temptation of Raimundo. And the episode begins with the Xiaolin monks as they're building what is essentially their own natural reservoir near a river. Of course, to try and make the job go faster, Raimundo tries to basically use a combination of the Orb of Tornami and the Jetbutsu to try and, fill in a hole they're making, but that just results in him flying all over the place thanks to the orbs, basically the orb going nuts, and everyone just gives Raimundo the stink eye because he didn't have any self-control. It's kind of dumb. But before they can chew him out any further, everyone sees something in the sky flying past the Earth, a comet specifically. And when Master Feng gets a closer look at the comet, thanks to the Falcon's Eye, he realizes that this particular comet is a unnatural one, something called the Xiaolin Comet, a rare occurrence that basically passes by the Earth. I don't really know if they really give a scale for when it comes by. All we know is that it's rare. Point is, when it's nearby, it is very dangerous to use the Shen Gong Wu. Mostly because the power of the Xiaolin Comet brings them to life. They will act on their own, and, well, it's called the Xiaolin Comet, so the Shen Gong Wu aren't going to be very nice. As such, until the comet passes by the Earth, the Xiaolin monks can't use their Shen Gong Wu, which means that for 3 days, since that's the duration of the Xiaolin Comet's stay, they are going to have to work without the Shen Gong Wu. And it's not going to be helped by the fact that Master Feng wants them to direct the nearby river so that it's closer to what they're building. So, that's kind of mean. However, the Xiaolin monks aren't the only ones that realize that the Xiaolin Comet has come by. Now, as we cut to Jack, Spicer, and Wuya is reveling in the fact that the Xiaolin Comet is here. She, of course, tells Jack that he can't use any of the Shen Gong Wu they have either, because, well, again, Shen Gong Wu alive, not a good idea. Although I should probably mention, Wuya actually explains this, Master Feng does not. He just says that they can't use the Shen Gong Wu. But Wuya wants to take advantage of the situation. She wants to help evil along, so to speak, and she knows exactly how to do it. As she has Jack to basically shoot a laser at the Xiaolin Comet, which was also a telescope, and while it doesn't destroy the Xiaolin Comet, it ends up knocking a chunk of it off and falls to the planet below. Specifically in Brazil, where it lands into a volcano and causes it to erupt and become active, and the lava flow ends up kind of going right towards a little town. I don't remember exactly what the town is called, but it is a treasured place to one of the Xiaolin monks. As we cut back to the Xiaolin temple after the Xiaolin monks have pretty much worked themselves to the bone to try and redirect the flow of the river, and as Raimundo just kind of pulls up his phone and checks the news, he finds a report about the lava flow in Brazil. And yeah, the town is his hometown. So, of course, he kind of has personal stake in wanting to save it. He, of course, rushes to the other Xiaolin monks and tries to wake them up so they can help him, but all of them are too conked out, so none of them budge. As such, Raimundo, realizing he kind of doesn't have any options, decides to go against what Master Feng ordered, and he ends up stealing 2 Shen Gong Wu, specifically the Golden Tiger Claws and the Sword of the Storms. And as such, using the Golden Tiger Claws, he warps to Brazil, and using the power of the Sword of the Storms plus his own natural wind element, he's able to basically redirect the flow of the lava so that it doesn't end up hitting his town. So, the day is saved, and the people actually celebrate Raimundo. So, he's a hero, he actually does good, and he basically just celebrates all through the night until the next morning, where Raimundo teleports back to the Xiaolin temple with the intent of just putting the Shen Gong Wu back. Unfortunately, though, this is where we see how the Shen Gong Wu act when they're alive, as we find that they are now getting a bit clingy, as when Raimundo tries to drop the Sword of the Storms, it ends up latching a sash around his arm, and it's only by Raimundo just kind of shaking it off that he's able to get it back in its place, but the Golden Tiger Claws, they're just stuck on his hand, and they are not coming off. And sure enough, the Golden Tiger Claws begin moving on their own. And of course, they seem to do the privilege of teleporting Raimundo back to his bunk, but they are not coming off, and when Raimundo tries calling out for help, they actually gag him. So, yeah, the Golden Tiger Claws are a bit malicious. And as such, the next day when Raimundo joins the other Xiaolin monks to try and build a reservoir, well, he can't really hide the Golden Tiger Claws, as while he does try putting a glove over his clad hand, they're claws. They're their golden tiger claws. They rip right through it. As such, the other Xiaolin monks are a little upset that Raimundo disobeyed Master Feng's orders, and while he does try to tell them about what happened in Brazil, none of them believe him. However, regardless of whether they believe him or not, the golden tiger claws are very much alive, and unfortunately, they don't want to be parted from Raimundo, as everyone tries rushing to Raimundo to get them off, and the golden tiger claws just start porting Raimundo everywhere so they stay away. Thankfully, they are able to finally get Raimundo as Clay is able to lasso him before he ports away, and they're able to wrap up the golden tiger claws. As such, it's clear that at this point, they need to keep an eye on Raimundo, because the golden tiger claws are now attached to a host, and they're clearly not friendly. So they need to try and keep Raimundo away from any Shen Gong Wu, at least until the Xiaolin comet has passed. And as such, they basically tie Raimundo up and leave him in his bunk, and have the monks just keep an eye on him. In this case, Omi. Unfortunately, though, while Omi is watching Raimundo, sleep kind of gets the better of both of the Xiaolin monks, and they both end up just falling asleep. And sure enough, the golden tiger claws take advantage of this as they cut through the rope tying up Raimundo, and basically bring Raimundo's body to the Shen Gong Wu vault, where we see it begin collecting more Shen Gong Wu to add to Raimundo's body. In this case, the golden tiger claws end up grabbing the third arm sash and the helmet of Zhong. And we basically end up seeing another side effect of the Shen Gong Wu exerting their will over Raimundo. As once the golden tiger claws pick up the third arm sash ends up wrapping around Raimundo, and he starts bulking up. Like, the instant the golden tiger claws make contact with the third arm sash, the arm that the golden tiger claws are attached to starts just getting all muscly and veiny, and the third arm sash just wraps around Raimundo's torso, and it just gets big and bulky too. As such, this ends up waking Raimundo up, as he sees the Shen Gong Wu basically just hijacking his body, and he tries fighting back, and he's able to succeed a little bit. But sadly, a little bit is not a lot, and the Shen Gong Wu end up getting the upper hand, as they manage to get the Orb of Tournami and the helmet of Zhong, they manage to force the helmet of Zhong on his head. Although it's not secure, as the helmet of Zhong is now just basically on his head backwards. And this is the moment where I say we kind of see the helmet of Zhong actually used for its intended purpose, because despite the fact that the helmet is not secured on Raimundo in the proper way, it's able to still clearly see, as it's on Raimundo's head backwards, and as Raimundo is able to get himself out of the temple, well, it's clear that the helmet is doing the walking for Raimundo's possessed body. And, well, it ends up getting something to look at, as Raimundo's cries for help do get the attention of the other Xiaolin monks, and so they all go out and find Raimundo, as he's basically just telling everyone he's being Wu-napped. As such, the Xiaolin warriors try to fight Raimundo off to try and, subdue him, but sadly, the evil Shen Gong Wu, I guess I can say, are basically just, they're wiping the floor with the other Xiaolin monks, and as a result, they end up getting enough of them subdued at the Shen Gong Wu were able to properly secure the helmet of Zhong onto Raimundo's head and just take him away to parts unknown. And as such, the next day, while the other Xiaolin monks are sulking in their victory and silently damning Raimundo because they think it was his fault for, taking the Shen Gong Wu when they weren't supposed to, well, Raimundo finally does get confirmation of his story from Dojo, who decided to basically check in on what Raimundo said, and yeah, it turns out he learned about the whole incident in Brazil, which means that Raimundo was not lying, and as a result, the Xiaolin monks start feeling kind of like jerks for throwing about all this unnecessary shade towards their friend. However, them learning this lesson doesn't really help in the long run, because now Raimundo is somewhere that they don't know, and he needs their help. Unfortunately, though, while Raimundo does run into someone as he's being dragged all over the place by the Shen Gong Wu, it's not a friend. As he's going through a field that's basically, as he's just going through a green field, well, he ends up running into Jack Spicer and Wuya, who have basically just come out of the earth in Jack's drill vehicle. I forget what it's called. But point is, they're here to give Raimundo a gift. In this case, Wuya wants Jack to give Raimundo the glove of Jisaku, something that Jack isn't exactly okay with, but he complies with nonetheless. And when the glove of Jisaku is presented to Raimundo, he tries to fight back, but the Wu end up exerting their will as they're able to, as they pretty much just force him getting closer, and the third arm sash ends up tripping him up, and he just falls over, and the glove just fits right onto his hand, which in turn bulks his other arm up something fierce. And yeah, Raimundo just starts getting buffer and buffer. And well, this is actually good news for Wuya. Why? Well, you see, the thing is, as Raimundo takes on more and more Shen Gong Wu, they are able to more and more exert their will over Raimundo. And while Raimundo is clearly still trying to fight back, eventually it's going to get to the point where the will of the Shen Gong Wu overrides the will of Raimundo. And as a result, Raimundo's will just be gone. So even by the time the Xiaolin comet passes and the Shen Gong Wu go back to being just inanimate objects, well, the lights will be on in Raimundo's head, but no one will be home, essentially making his body just an empty shell. And, well, when your body's empty, it means that anyone can just come in and take it. In other words, Wuya wants Raimundo's body. That actually sounds dirtier when you say it out loud. Point is, she wants to take control of him. However, after Raimundo gets the glove of Jisaku, the Xiaolin monks manage to catch up with Rai, and they seem to get through to him enough that he's able to at least willingly go with the Xiaolin monks back to the temple. However, this is actually what Wuya wants, and it turns out that maybe the Shen Gong Wu are more okay with this than everyone realizes, because once Raimundo is back at the temple, well, it's clear the Shen Gong Wu are still in the driver's seat, and Raimundo and the Wu are still kind of fighting over who gets to be in control of Rai's body. And well, while the Xiaolin monks are still worried about Rai, they even try to figure out how they can, fix him. Well, the Shen Gong Wu are a little bit impatient because they want to add more Wu to their growing collection, as they basically just take Rai out into the temple and just start looking for Shen Gong Wu. Omi, of course, thinks that everyone will be fine, that he took the precaution of hiding most of their Shen Gong Wu, so it shouldn't be a problem. Well, you gotta remember, Raimundo has the glove of Jisaku, and so Raimundo ends up using the glove to pretty much pull all the Shen Gong Wu that Omi had hidden around the temple straight to Raimundo's body. And sure enough, the more Wu get added to his body, the more monstrous he becomes as he just starts bulking out more and more to the point where he just looks like a hideous creature. Like he's got a big jaw with big teeth. He's just all big and veiny. Most of his clothes are ripped. He's pretty much just a Hulk with Shen Gong Wu powers. And ultimately, it's clear that he's now too powerful. As such, the Xiaolin monks try to surround him and subdue him again, but a combination of the Longi kite and the serpent's tail allows Raimundo to just easily fly away, where he ends up making his way to Jack Spicer's lab. Why? Fuck if I know. I guess the Shen Gong Wu are working with Wuya. It is called the Xiaolin Comet after all. Whatever. Point is, they're there with Wuya now, and now it's really just a matter of waiting until the Xiaolin Comet passes, and there will be no will left in Raimundo's body. That happens as during the course of the day, the Xiaolin Comet passes, and it is now safe to freely use the Shen Gong Wu. And thankfully, there are still some Wu that the Xiaolin monks have that they can still rather easily use. And as such, they decided they need to take that Wu and then storm Jack's house once again, and, well, just get Raimundo back. Though Omi thinks that they'll have a fighting chance, because he still thinks that Raimundo is up here, even though his body is mostly just empty now. As such, the Xiaolin monks make their way to Jack Spicer's house, and they end up challenging Jack and Wuya for Raimundo. And while Wuya orders Jack to send out his jackbots, he says they're not available because they're in the shop. And so she decides to accelerate her plans, and she just jumps right into Raimundo's body and takes it over. And one of the first things she does is pose with it. Again, she acts like she's on the cover of a magazine, even when she's in Raimundo's hulking, hideous body. I guess you can say she's body positive. I don't know. Point is, she now has a body and it's armed with a crap ton of Shen Gong Wu, so this is dangerous. However, Omi instead challenges Wuya to a Xiaolin showdown. Specifically, a 4-way cosmic clash Xiaolin showdown. Yeah, I don't really know the rules of this one. It looks like it's just a 3-on-1 battle, as we have Omi, Kimiko, and Clay versus Wuya. And instead of them fighting over a Shen Gong Wu, they're instead fighting over Raimundo. And apparently he can do this because it actually is in the rules. Yeah, apparently you can actually fight over a person in a Xiaolin showdown if they're at least half Shen Gong Wu or incredibly hideous and monstrous. So Raimundo qualifies, I guess? I don't know. It's weird. I don't know, I don't care. Point is, it's a Xiaolin showdown. And basically, the Xiaolin monks end up wagering the Tangle Web Comb, the Fist of Tebigong, and the Lotus Twister against Wuya's Helmet of Zhong, Mantis Flip Coin, and Third Arm Sash. And the challenge, which is decided by Wuya for some reason, is Steal the Wu. Whoever is able to obtain the other opponent's Shen Gong Wu first will be declared the winner. As such, with the conditions all stated, the Xiaolin showdown is called, and again, it's actually a pretty creative Xiaolin showdown. It's not one of my favorite setups in the series, but it is a creative one as the showdown just takes Jack's house, disassembles it into little pieces, and then rearranges it into a little mini globe. That's basically with all the continents just lit up with little mini versions of famous landmarks and so forth. So I dig it. It's kind of cool. As such, with the yell of Gong Yi Tongue Pai, the Xiaolin monks end up duking it out with Wuya. And in the beginning, Wuya seems to actually get some wins as she manages to steal the Fist of Tebigong and the Tangle Web Cone from Clay and Kimiko. As such, all that's left is Omi, and while he's able to evade Wuya enough so that she can't get the Lotus Twister, it's still not exactly helping. However, they're at least able to distract Wuya enough to at least knock some of the Shen Gong Wu off of her body, but with a fair bit of cheating, which the Xiaolin monks call her out on, even though Omi did something similar in an earlier episode, but whatever. Wuya ends up using the Shroud of Shadows to basically hide and start ambushing the Xiaolin monks. As such, they realize that they can't really fight an opponent that they can't see, but Omi thinks that Raimundo will be able to help them. As such, the three Xiaolin monks basically do a Dragon X Kume formation, and this manages to stir enough gray matter in Raimundo's head that he's able to start exerting more of his will and start getting his mind back out there. As such, the Xiaolin monks see him fighting back from the inside, and Omi is able to call out to him and basically give him that extra oomph that he needs, and from there, Raimundo just starts ripping Shen Gong Wu off of his body every which way, and Wuya is helpless to stop it before she's just thrown out of Raimundo's body. As a result, since Raimundo ends up ditching most of the Shen Gong Wu that he had on him, he not only reverts back to his normal self, but because the Xiaolin monks technically got all the Wu, they end up winning the showdown, reverting everything to normal, and subsequently getting Raimundo back on their side, with Wuya getting angry that her whole plan to take over Raimundo failed, and Jack Spicer pouring salt in the wound that he's not the one that failed this time, since Wuya was the one that was in the showdown, so there you go. Either way, the episode ends as the Xiaolin monks grab whatever Wu they can, with Jack Spicer, of course, taking what he can grab too, and returning to the temple with the Xiaolin monks once again apologizing to Raimundo that they didn't believe his story, and Omi saying that from now on he'll believe any outlandish story that Raimundo tells him, no matter how unbelievable it is. It's kind of a nice backhanded compliment, but hey, it's the thought that counts, I suppose, so there you go. Anyway, so that was the last temptation of Raimundo. Honestly, I enjoy this episode. I will give some crap maybe to the moral because, well, I feel like the whole idea of them basically giving Raimundo the stink eye is a little far-fetched. I'm willing to give him maybe a little bit of leeway on that because it's still Raimundo. And while he's clearly met someone that's dedicated to the Xiaolin cause, even in Season 2, he's the guy that tends to be the most lazy and one that usually tends to screw up the most. And as a result, it makes sense why they would be a little dubious of Raimundo, especially considering the circumstances. Although I will at least give credit where it's due, I like that Dojo did go and confirm his story. So I at least like that. But otherwise, I guess I can still give some crap to the episode about the Xiaolin monks not totally believing Raimundo. And even if you were going to say, well, of course they wouldn't believe him because Raimundo tends to make stuff up all the time, counterpoint, he's still in danger, and regardless of the reason for why he took the Shen Gong Wu, he is clearly the one suffering the most here, as the Shen Gong Wu are beginning to exert their influence over him, and he is clearly trying to fight back, but he's failing because the Shen Gong Wu are just too damn powerful. You'd think they'd feel maybe a little bit sorry for their friend. It just kind of feels like a nice bit of screw you when they're worried where Raimundo is, but then they're like, well, if he hadn't stolen the Shen Gong Wu, then none of this would have happened. Like, asshole, whatever the asshole, it was just a simple mistake. And I'm still gonna give some shade to Master Feng here. He didn't tell the Xiaolin monks that, oh, the Shen Gong Wu are alive and they're gonna try and take over your bodies. No, he just said, don't use the Shen Gong Wu. It's dangerous right now. Which, okay, he does at least give them some warning, but he could have at least gone into specifics, maybe a little bit. I'm just saying Master Feng could have just said, maybe give them a little bit more details and said, by the way, the Shen Gong Wu are gonna try and take over your bodies, and the longer you have them, the more Wu they're gonna try and add, so just steer clear no matter what. So I'll give you that. So yeah. Again, I will give some leeway because I can understand that they'd be a little doubtful because they didn't see Raimundo doing the thing. And yeah, the story did sound a little far-fetched when Raimundo told it, especially when he started putting a little bit more emphasis on the fact that he was celebrated and there was a big party. But at the same time, their friend is still clearly suffering right now. So maybe, just maybe you can cut him some slack. Mistakes do happen, and while this is a big crucial one, I think Raimundo has kind of learned his lesson from the fact that the Shen Gong Wu are literally trying to take over his body. Just saying. So, I don't know, I'm probably going to give a little bit of crap for that, but I think the rest of the episode more than makes up for it. I at least do like that when the Xiaolin monks do realize that Raimundo was telling the truth, that they do properly give themselves a good lashing as they realize, okay, we were being unnecessarily mean to this guy, we should have at least heard him out, and he did have a good reason for doing what he did. While it did come back to bite him in the ass, Raimundo did at least do a heroic deed and was acting selflessly. He wasn't being stupid is what I'm going to say. He did try to save the Xiaolin monks, and you could argue that him jumping to using the Shen Gong Wu when he did, even though he was told not to use them, well, it's his hometown. He was desperate, and odds are he would try and risk life and limb just to save his hometown, which he did. He did save them. Yeah, it cost. Yeah, it came back. Yeah, it had very dire consequences. But what was he supposed to do? Just sit in the Xiaolin temple and be like, well, no one's awake. I guess I'm just gonna sit here and let everyone I know and love die. Just no. I at least like that, and likewise, I think that I do kind of like the whole idea behind the moral of the episode. That even if they don't fully want to they don't want to fully believe the story, at the end of the day, it does kind of help them learn to hold on one second. Sorry, I had to kind of figure out how to properly say this. I like that this episode, in a way, kind of affirms the Xiaolin monk's trust in Raimundo. Because, at the end of the day, while the story he gave was outlandish, and it's Raimundo, he's the one that typically would like to mess with people and do something stupid, at the same time, he wasn't lying. And what he did was selfless. He wanted to help his hometown, and at the end, when it came down to it, yeah, what he did come back to bite him in the ass, as no good deed goes unpunished. But it was still a selfless act, and his friend, and the fact that the Xiaolin monks didn't believe him at first does kind of make them feel like jerks, which they should. But at the same time, I do at least like that when they realize that he was telling the truth, it helps affirm their trust in Raimundo, and they do at least act a little bit kinder when they go to see him. Although I think they should have still been kind of kind to him, considering again his body's being taken over. But I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But so I at least do like that, and likewise, even as Raimundo does get taken over more and more by the Shen Gong Wu, I like that Omi is the one that does kind of stand up for him more and more. Basically, despite the fact that Raimundo is still being slowly taken over, he's the one that extends a hand of friendship. He's the one that tries acting cordial to him when he's brought back to the Xiaolin temple. And likewise, when the Xiaolin monks are given the okay to use the Shen Gong Wu again, Omi is the one that says that when they go there, it'll still be 4 against 1, because he knows that Raimundo is probably still fighting in there. He just probably needs a friend to help out, which I like. And I'll even give credit. I like that he kind of beats himself up over the fact that he didn't act like a good friend by not keeping an eye on Raimundo when he needed him most, which I do kind of like. It was a simple mistake, I will admit, because it was nighttime and he was tired, and I admit that, yeah, he probably should have kept a better eye on Raimundo, but in that same sense, he acknowledges that he screwed up, and this is basically him trying to say, I screwed up, I'm gonna make it right. So I like that. I do at least like that. But, again, I guess in that regard it is a little nice, and it does at least help affirm the Xiaolin monk's trust in Raimundo, knowing that he disobeyed orders for good reason. But I think what helps make the episode also work is what happens to Raimundo. This episode is fucking creepy. From the instant the Xiaolin comet first enters the fray, there's just an unsettling vibe to what's going on in this episode. From the Xiaolin, from the moment they see it, from the moment that the Master Feng sees it with the Falcon's Eye, though you wonder why the Falcon's Eye didn't take him over, but although in this case you could argue maybe it took time for the Xiaolin comet's effects to start going over everything, as despite the fact that it was close to the Earth, the Xiaolin monks were still able to use at least some of the Shen Gong Wu before they started going nuts. But at the very least, the whole idea with the Xiaolin comet bringing the Shen Gong Wu to life is a little creepy. Now again, and this isn't, and again, we've seen that sometimes the Shen Gong Wu they don't play nice, so to speak, with two major examples being the Heart of Zhong and the Sapphire Dragon, as both of those Shen Gong Wu have created things that are not friendly at all. But the whole idea behind the Xiaolin Comet is that it pretty much gives them Shen Gong Wu a malicious will of their own. And they'll play ball enough with people, but it's clear they're only doing this because because they have an end goal in mind, which in this case is to take over someone's body. As once Raimundo starts basically fighting with the Golden Tiger Claws, we see these things we see how possessive these things get as they just hold on to him, just exert their will over him. When he tries calling for help, they cover up his mouth. And then likewise as we see Raimundo fighting the Shen Gong Wu as they're taking over its body, it's horrifying. One of the most terrifying things that I can imagine is becoming a prisoner of your own body. The very thought of it is just fucking chilling to me. It's basically a nightmare scenario for me. So to see Raimundo just crying out for help as the Shen Gong Wu start latching onto him and he starts losing control of his body more and more, it's genuinely horrifying. And seeing the Shen Gong Wu start bulking him up more and more as we see them exerting their will over him while he's just struggling in vain to try and get control of his body back, it's terrifying. It's sad. And by the end of the second act, when Raimundo is completely taken over, it's kind of a horrifying sight, seeing him just decked out on all these Wu and becoming basically a giant hulking monster. So I like that. I genuinely liked that. It kind of makes me wish that the episode ended with a confrontation with the Shen Gong Wu themselves instead of against Wuya. And I'm not criticizing the climax here. I think it's an okay climax. It at least helps reassert the moral of the Xiaolin monks, basically reaffirming their trust in Raimundo, as they're able to get through to him enough to wake him back up, and he ends up giving them the extra push they need to win the final showdown. But at the same time, I think it would have been a little cool if they actually did confront the Shen Gong Wu and Raimundo fought back. So again, though, the ending we got is still fine. I do still like it. It's just that it would have been a little cool if they actually duked it out with the Shen Gong themselves and Raimundo was able to force them off of his own will. With that said, we still do kind of get that as Raimundo was able to wake up and forces Wuya out, so I at least like that, and I think it's fun. And I'll still give credit where it's due. I kind of like that Wuya is still kind of a vain bitch. Like, when she is like when she's given the prospect of being able to take control of Raimundo's body, she just kind of salivates at it, and even before she gets into his body, she just starts posing and being happy that she'll have a physical form again. And like I said, the instant that she jumps into Raimundo's body, the first thing she does is throw her hand behind her head and start posing like she's on a magazine cover. Like, again, Wuya is very body positive, so I'll give her that. I kind of like that, which I guess makes sense considering that as an ethereal spirit, it probably gives her a better appreciation for the physical form when you don't have it. It's the same time I still kind of find it a little ridiculous, but I also still kind of love it. And so it is still kind of fun to see her just having absolute fun with the show, having absolute fun when she's in Raimundo's body. So I do still like that. I still think that's kind of cool. As it's nice to actually see Wuya being the active force for once in a while. As in this case, she's not an advisor. She's not on the sidelines. She's actively doing something. So again, I like that. I do think it's nice. And and again, while I am a little disappointed that we didn't have Raimundo, beat back the living Shen Gong Wu, what we do have from the climax is still fine, because it still does give us the whole thing of Raimundo regaining control of his body, and it's through the help of the Xiaolin monks that he's able to do it. And I like that. I do at least like that. So while I will still give a little bit of crap that Raimundo probably could have given a bit more credence, I think the moral is a good one. I do think it's a good one, as it actually kind of helps as it actually kind of furthers the characters of not Raimundo, but the Xiaolin monks themselves. Now, as the thing is, while we haven't seen this happen a lot in the series, it's nice that we're seeing a bit of blowback towards Raimundo. After, like, one of the criticisms that I've had when other episodes is that when we've seen the Xiaolin monks give Raimundo crap, it feels a little out of place, since when Raimundo joined up with the good guys again, they were seen to be okay with it, and yet every once in a while they'll still say, "But can we trust him?" Now, believe it or not, and I do find that to be a little out of place and a little strange, but it at least makes sense but at least it would make sense that they have reservations about trusting Raimundo again. I just wish that we had seen a bit further. But this episode, what I like is that how they at least do address their distrust of Raimundo. It's not the fact that whether he's loyal to the cause, it's whether he's taking the job seriously or not. As we see him, like I said, the episode opened with him thinking that he could do something superior and it blowing up in his face, and the Xiaolin monks gave him crap for it, and the whole story that he came up with about saving his village from the volcano, it sounds like a typical Rai story about that he would make up. It basically feels like something that Raimundo would just throw out there because, well, it makes him look good, even if it didn't really happen. But the fact that it's later confirmed, no, this was true. Raimundo did save his village, and he basically was put in a position where he either had to just let him die or be possessed by the Shen Gong Wu. Well, he chose the latter choice, which in turn makes them feel like jackasses when they realized they were giving him unnecessary grief for something that he couldn't just sit back and do nothing about. And so it helps kind of make the second half of the episode even more it kind of work better emotionally when the Xiaolin monks are trying to put their best foot forward to try and get Raimundo back to the side, to try and help Raimundo to get rid of the Shen Gong Wu. Mind you, I will still give them some crap for the fact that even when Raimundo does come back with them to the temple, they don't tie him up or secure him in any way. Look, I get it. They want to give him more trust and show that they do trust him. Counter argument, you know the Shen Gong Wu are possessing his body and are gonna force him to look for more. I think at this point, maybe, just maybe, you should keep him tied down. I think Raimundo will understand. He knows these things are trying to take over his body. I think he would actually agree with you when you say, sorry Raimundo, we need to tie you up. I'm just saying, because guess what? Because they don't secure him, he uses the glove of Jisaku to find more Shen Gong Wu. So, I'm gonna give them that kind of crap. That's kind of dumb. But again, for what it's worth, I think the episode does work, mostly because of one, I at least like that the minor bits of character development we have with the Xiaolin monks, they realize that as they have to kind of accept that Raimundo is trustworthy despite his carefree, laid-back attitude, and likewise the whole stuff with the Shen Gong Wu as they act on their own and start slowly possessing Raimundo, it's fucking creepy and terrifying, and it keeps me engaged as we see Raimundo try and fight back. And while I would have liked it if the final showdown had been against the Wu themselves, I still think the final showdown is still a pretty nice one, as we see the Xiaolin monks reassert the trust they have in Raimundo, and because they're able to reach him enough, it gives him enough of that extra push that he's able to force Wuya out and get rid and shake off all of the Wu. I do at least like that, and it does keep the episode and it does ultimately make this episode an enjoyable one for me. So yeah, while I do have maybe like one or two minor complaints with the episode, overall it's still really damn good. Has a great theme has a great bit of creepiness to it with the Shen Gong Wu acting on their own. The climax is a lot of fun. I like the lesson. The lesson I think was an alright lesson, and overall I think worked. So when it comes down to it, I think this is a pretty damn good episode. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and I'll see you next week as well. We see Chase Young come back let's just say that he starts putting more pieces in place. So to then, I hope you have a good night and take care.